Welcome to the program. This is AM Prime here on WESN. I'm Andy Johnston. It's October 20th, 2022. Let's tell you what's happening this morning. We're going to be talking in the next hour with Mr. Nikolai Edwards. He's leading a charge now for attention to be paid to the situation regarding mediators in the country. He says this is affecting a lot of people, the question of the need for mediation, what has happened with the mediation board. I think based on activism thus far, there's been an announcement that a new board is to be put in place. This is after a 2-year hiatus of anybody addressing the question of mediation and mediators in the country. Also, we're talking with Ms. Folade Mutota. She's the head of an organization called the Women's Institute for Alternative Development. And interestingly, they have put out a statement calling for more investigation into what happened with the case that collapsed. Vincent Nelson, Ran Ram Logan, and company. We know the matter. We've been talking about it. It's been front page news. It's been top of the headlines for the last 2 weeks, but there's more to be unraveled as we get to this point. And she's calling for further investigations into what happened and why. Of course, we have some stops to make around the region. We tell you where we go as we go along. That includes Barbados. And we're going further than that. We're talking outside of the region now. We have some features that we want to get to you. So those things and more in the program. But right now, we're talking with Mr. Rishi Sukai. He's the president of the Chaguanas Chamber of Commerce. And again, the issue is crime in the country. There seems to be no let-up in the activities and not enough attention being paid to what to do to address it. And we're talking against the background of the shooting incident in Enterprise a couple of days ago in which a 9-year-old boy was killed because, as we heard the Minister of National Security saying in the last 24 hours, that action took place because some people in a gang decided that there was going to be a fete in the place called Africa Ground, and some other people decided they didn't want that to happen, so that they wanted to stage something that would cause people to not to want to go to that. And that created gunfire in which this 9-year-old boy was killed. He simply happened to be there watching a football match. What to be done about the escalating, the continuing crime in the country? Mr. Sukai, thanks for coming on.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Good morning to the WSN family and Trinidad and Tobago and all your viewing and listening public. I will say, when I start off with a profound quote recently that I read, it's actually by Professor Frost, where he stated, not verbatim, but he explained in his quote, the culture in basically any organization is driven by leadership, right? I mean, without the absence of leadership, the culture forms itself, it builds itself, and this is what we're seeing. Because of that absence of leadership, and I will say a strong leadership within the TTPS, because we have been acting, and we're not seeing that leadership to really take handle of what's going on the ground. I think crime is spiraling out of control. I see where this incident of a 9-year-old boy being killed in the grounds in Enterprise, right, is saddening. 2 is it should have had a greater impact on the community and on Trinidad and Tobago as a whole, because this is a 9-year-old boy who just lost his life innocently. Just by what? Going to watch a football game. He wasn't in any nefarious activities. He wasn't, to be where he shouldn't be. It saddens me to the extent that we have to face with this. And so much have been done, so much resources, so much groups, and many groups have been entered into that area in particular to sort of build on the youth, to try and eliminate, to make people move away from a life of crime. But is it such an easy thing to pick up a gun or just conduct these sort of activities and get away with it, and knowing that you can get away with it with any other repercussion taking place? And this is the saddening and degrading part that we are living with right now.
Yeah, you say that the issue really is about leadership in the country, but you focused on the police service.
I'm talking about the leadership when it comes to, especially, let's focus on the TTPS right now, right? I strongly believe that something needs to be done, in terms of our men and women who are on the ground, who are protecting our nation. It has, I mean, it stems not only with TTPS, because if you look on the general, on a general look at it, you know, they will blame the judicial system that they are not, when they do capture these criminals, the judiciary is not doing what they're supposed to do to ensure that they stay behind bars. Sometimes you have a collapse even in resources put in towards the different efforts that they have. And I believe, and the reason why I say this is because we have a management issue. If every year,
in the country generally,
I'm talking about in general. If you look at national security, we're just focusing on national security for right now. If you look at national security, lion's shares of the budget are always allocated towards national security.
So that's not the problem.
I believe the problem is management. How we manage, how we distribute funds, what are some of the initiatives that we're doing, where the checks and balances, the KPIs, so that we can then after have an assessment at the end of the day. You know, you hear different schools of thoughts. They say that you can't run an organization, a public organization, like a business, but I refuse to believe that, because it is a business. You're providing a service, right? If you're providing a level of service to your customers, who are the customers? The public, the general public. There should be some sort of checks and balances on what is the public's perception of how your service is being delivered. And in that way now, it all comes down to leadership.
Yeah, I think when people talk about that, they're referring to the profit motive. In some organizations, that's not the primary objective.
But then again,
but that leadership is critical, and so that's the most critical variable. That's what
correct.
you say.
But then again, it's how you measure profit. Is it profit just dollars and cents, or profit customer satisfaction? You understand what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, it is sort of a management issue, how you take forward. And again, something needs to be done, whether we relook that whole area, because you said it before the interview when we were speaking, is that these are not new areas. These hotspot areas have been known for years. Government after government have been trying to sort of revamp or even, you know, reform some of these areas, but yet to no avail. We're still in this.
You remember a fellow named Robocop?
Oh, yeah.
Right, so he was somebody who came out of that area. And that is, you know, so we're talking a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, I could always remember when I was a little boy, he always heard about Robocop I believe when he was in his younger days.
Yeah.
And growing up in Chaguanas, he was a figure that one fed, I mean, hence the name Robocop.
Yeah.
And, you know, he passed away about a couple of years back, but yet...
He was taken out himself.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yet you have younger, more ambitious individuals coming and taking their place. I believe the older heads had a sort of credo that they worked with. And that alliance kept some sort of peace. Whether or not that is there or that credo still exists is something to be reminiscent.
Yeah, but it seems as though the community and the activities of some are impervious to anything that is tried. The question is to what extent what is being tried is effective. Because on the other hand, you had let's take the organization known as what is it? The first wave movement, and Umar Abdullah.
Yeah.
So we didn't know about him long before. He emerged as somebody who went in there, had an organization, going in there to pay attention to what was happening, and to whatever extent he is working in there, and all the sort of positive ideas he may have, because he's he's a very vocal sort of advocate, but his presence, there's an organization called the Riodan Dojo, which is teaching people a new way of life through the martial arts and kinds of things and so on. And there are other kinds of groups working at different levels, but nothing seems to be really delivering the results that they want, which is to bring a culture of peace and so on in that area alone.
I don't believe pumping resources is a solution. I believe is more like understanding what is causing the crime, understanding where the root cause is, and how can we start eliminate. But it's whether or not the officials at the top have the willpower to make changes. willpower to truly shake up what's going on the ground.
And when you talk about the officials,
I'm talking about
like,
not infrastructure, but more or less, if we know who are the criminals are, we know who are the who's who, and is it that, I'll put it in broad sentences. Is it that we are protecting these individuals due to their hierarchy or where they rank, or is it that we really look at these individuals in some of these areas and say, okay, that's collateral damage, and let's turn our backs? It's unfair.
Well, it can be if you have a 9-year-old boy in a situation where there's a football match taking place and a 9-year-old boy gets killed. I mean, how that gets to be counted as
like again, if you look back, I mean, you basically spell the story. It's a gang that's looking at another gang saying, oh, they're going to have a party or whatever event, and we are going to make sure to cause disruption. I mean, come on. Why is it that we can't live?
And the things happen with impunity over and over.
And as the innocent bystanders get killed. And that's the sad part.
Yeah. You in the beginning of the conversation, you began to talk about the periods of time that we'd had people in positions of authority but acting. We went through 7 years of a police commissioner who was acting. Then we saw what happened in the parliament. Somebody was put in the place and was confirmed. Well, the Prime Minister came forward to say that he had lost confidence in that individual. We're in a situation now where somebody is acting, we don't know what's going to happen. All those things have their effect, you think?
Yes, it does. Honestly, it does. At the end of the day, it's the confidence that without proper leadership, again, once more, having the assurance that you have a leader that will be there to stand and look for some sort of trajectory of how the organization is running is important. And I think that we should not be, in a light way, pussyfooting around selecting a commissioner. It should be done because of the spiraling situation of crime. We can't continue with this philosophy of just having actors in positions.
You think action should have been taken since the termination of the contract or the refusal to renew the contract of that gentleman? Of
the previous commissioner.
To make it such that you have a commissioner, or who is the commissioner?
Yeah, who is the commissioner, instead of just having, I've had several interactions with Mr. Jacobs. He has many lofty and wonderful ideas. It's whether or not we are able to take it and implement them in time. You hear so many wonderful strategic plans that have been plotted out using technology, using greater force, implementing resources in certain things, but yet you have crimes like these taking place. I am pretty sure if the feelers were on the ground about the tension that was developing due to that event, are you telling me that something can be done to sort of quell that situation?
Here's a question that...
because intelligence would have, said, listen, there is an issue. You have the gangs that are rival gangs basically having a potential attack due to whatever it is, right? I mean, intelligence is all over. And if intelligence gathering is something that we're lacking, then we should have had the feelers on the ground, especially in that area. It's a hotspot. I mean, it was ridiculous. We have a society, 1.4, 1.5 million, and we can't get this right by now?
Yeah, the question, you raised it, I was going to come to it, the issue of the existence of gangs. Well, I've spoken about it, I've written about it, that after decades of where we started on this question of tracking crime in the country, we got to the stage where we felt that it was necessary to have what was called gang legislation. Gang legislation has been in place for long enough now, and so to me and to other people, it is spectacular to hear law enforcement people talking about their knowledge of the existence of gangs and how they operate and who is who in which gang and so on. When, to me, the law prohibits the formation of gangs and the law prohibits membership in gangs. So how could we be talking about the existence of gangs? We know what they're doing, but nothing is being done to punish people, to prosecute people simply for being in gangs.
And it's the same thing we come back to, that the police or the armed forces will always throw it back to the judiciary that, listen, we have done our job, we have caught the criminal, we present them to you, keep them behind bars, or let's prosecute. And you know what? Our judicial system really needs a revamping. because they get lost in the system. They may get maybe a slap on the wrist, out the next day. You know, when you look at murderers and even rapists in this country and how likely they are taken, and sometimes I'm appalled. If we have a list, the SABGA list, that actually states names of individuals who committed crimes, be it how many eons ago, right? Why hasn't been there a publication? Let them be name-shamed and brought to the forefront. In the United States, in many instances, look at the Harry Winston case, for instance.
Yeah,
such Weinstein case, where he is such a prominent figure. Yet he's been out into the public for what he did, forming the Me Too movement coming forward. We need something like that. Shaking up needs to be done in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do those things, how are they continuing to affect how you see the effect on people's lives, on business activity and so on in that district? It's not much different in other parts of the country, but there continues to be this focus on Shoguners.
And honestly, enterprises are part of Shoguners. That is a beautiful part of Shoguners that needs to be taken care of. And if we don't do that, you know, I've been saying it for years, we will still have that infiltration of negative elements entering and will be infiltrated into the rest of Shoguners as is, because they tend to do it from time to time, going into different villages and into the city itself, hampering business. So what it does, everyone knows it reduces investor confidence. You have people still invested in such a way by putting up, you know, we have mega structures going on, we have malls, we have new interests in the Shoguners. And it is just because of survival, people need to do something different, and the opportunity is there. Shoguners is a hub. It has been a business hub that has grown over time. And I will say, without government intervention, Shoguners has grown to where it is due to the resilience of this business community. The few government infrastructure, and again, I'm not single-handedly pointing out West One. I'm talking about subsequent government of the past, right? What have they actually really done? Because guess what? The traffic situation didn't start today in Shoguners. It has been there for years, and it's been getting progressively worse, right? But yet, we're resilient. Yet, we have many people coming into the Burgess. Yet, we have crime spiraling out of control. What needs to be done? You know?
So you're saying that there's a community that prospers regardless of, irrespective of? It
prospers, but to a point. I believe if we could fix some of these ills that we're facing, we can have a more prosperous Shoguners, and by extension, prosperous Trinidad and Tobago.
What takes place in the discussions and the meetings you all will have as business leaders with other leaders in other sectors of that network, whether it's some people in the different phases of the government, whether it's the national government, the borough corporation,
right,
or the police leadership and so on?
So, very interesting question. We have been having stakeholder meetings with the Borough Corporation, with Central Division. We have a new senior soup in the Central Division in Shoguners, and that to me, that's another issue of changing senior soups so quickly. You know, within the space of 3, 4 years, 5 years, you have another senior soup entering into the organization, and that culture needs to be changed, because every senior soup that you put now has to learn.
There's a learning curve.
You understand? Overcome. And when the old one is now already on a part where he can view. I mean, the interesting thing is that Johnny Abraham was in that position for a very long time, right? And he was able to put a certain dent into what was going on and keep things at bay. How he did it, or what was ever, you know, his methods is left unknown. However, he was there for a very long time. What is it keeping having an individual selected into that position for the longest while? Because I can know, as far as I know as I'm president, and this is like the second time around, they've been changing senior soup like changing clothes. It's unfortunate, because when they're now getting to know the people, they're now getting to know the business community, they're now able to pick up the phone and say, listen, so is the case. A new person enters.
Either they get transferred or they get to the age of retirement.
Yeah, or even, you know, promoted. But it's sad, because then you're not allowing the individuals to have time to develop, to grow his team, which is the Central Division Task Force, and create something that is powerful enough to infiltrate these societies. Because now this new senior soup has to go, he has to study the area, you have to understand the demographics before even, and then boom, maybe in 1-2 months, you have another one coming.
Yeah. And then he has to get a sense of the people around him, who is who and who might be on which side,
Correct.
so to speak.
And then after trying to understand and then learning the politics behind it. So coming back to your question, yes, we do have these meetings, right? Whether or not, and sometimes to me, I think it's a talk shop, because we will say certain things, we will hope for certain changes, but yet we have these things, these situations rearing its head. How unfortunate it is, it should not be. It should not be.
Yeah, you talked about resilience, but the question on the back of that is to what extent you see that people aren't willing either to continue to operate in the area, or aren't being motivated in the first place to get involved in business as well as civic activity.
Yeah, I mean, confidence, investor confidence is, I will say, is at a low. However, it is still present, right? You have the Brentwood Mall being the newest establishment around that area. With that,
it is being expanded.
Again, they've just finished first phase and they're going into second phase, which gives, again, hope to the area that new things are coming, new institutions are going to be formed, new services will be provided. More traffic at the end of the day. But you know what? It gives the criminals now opportunities, because Brentwood had an incident recently, of a robbery. Yes, they have done their best to try and put things in place to beef up security. However, they've been asking to have their cameras linked to the national grid. I'm talking about along with TTPS, because Central Division was supposed to have a command center to monitor these CCTV cameras.
They were supposed to.
They were supposed to. I'm not too sure how far they are in terms of having it established. I know there were some issues, electrical issues that they had with the room, which again the business community pulled together to provide them with the necessary material to have that completed. But yet, these linkages with different CCTV cameras, I'm talking about business owners who are willing to share some of their footage, at least, for the roadways, so that they can capture key, key situations that may happen, so that it could help them with their investigation, or even prevent things from happening. If you look at it in London, for instance, they use the CCTV camera methods as a prevention to the crime, because they can monitor before to see when certain activities are about to take place. Simple as these.
Because there's a reluctance to do that with the security forces here, with the people in charge.
I think it's a lack of the human resources and capacity to really focus. And when I say lack, we do have skilled individuals, maybe not enough, that will be able to sit down there 24 hours. I'm not talking about one individual, but you have the change in shift that could actually view footages and predict or spell a story that of something that could possibly take place.
All right. If there's one message you want to leave with us?
I mean, I would like to see Trinidad and Tobago, concerning this crime situation, something needs to be done, because if we continue on this path, the figures for now, I believe, is almost 5.
Probably close to 500.
Yes, right.
With 2 months to go in there.
Which is sad. Usually, I remember as a boy, I would track, and I remember 365 days of the year, watching the murder toll, hoping that it doesn't cross 300, right? Making 365 a marker, saying, please don't cross, please don't cross. Now we passed that well into the middle of the year, and it's sad. A population of 1.5, 1.4,
Ichisukai, Chairman, President of the Shogun's Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a break. There's much more on the other side. Stay with us.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point
weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McBean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Welcome back to the program. Ms. Folade Mututa. She's the head of an organization called the Women's Institute for Alternative Development. And they issued a statement a couple of days ago saying, among other things, they've called for an investigation into the indemnity deal offered to Vincent Nelson to prosecute former Attorney General Anand Ramlogan and former Government Senator Gerald Ramdeen. The deal was reportedly offered to Nelson in exchange for his testimony against Ramlogan and Ramdeen in a corruption case brought against them by the state. However, the case has since been discontinued. We know that by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions due to Nelson's refusal to testify until he claims his civil lawsuit against the state is completed. Since then, there has been some condemnation of former Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi, who reportedly oversaw the deal based on legal advice. Ms. Mututa is calling for an investigation into what happened there. Good to see you.
Good seeing you, Andy. Good morning, and good morning to your viewers and your listeners.
Yeah, I'm starting by saying that it's been a while since you've sort of taken this space anywhere in the media to say anything about current affairs. My own view is that you decided to take a backseat a little bit or to watch things develop to a point, but something provoked you enough to issue this statement. What is it?
Well, I'm not altogether sure that I've been sitting it out. It's quite difficult to sit out what's happening generally in Trinidad and Tobago. But one of the important pieces of work that WINAD does is the business of succession planning. So you may hear the voices that speak on the issues that concern us greatly. On this particular matter, I'm the point person, and so that's really all that it is. One of our thematic areas of work as a women's organization is this business of governance. We have a really deep concern that we need to find a governance model that allows citizen participation in decision making. on really key issues. Of course, we recognize that there are areas of state responsibility that we would not be able to engage in, but we think that there is more than sufficient room for us to look more closely at designing a governance model that really allows citizens to participate more directly in decision making, but also gives us more access to information in a timely manner. So for us, the whole situation that has unfolded and seems to be continuing to unfold, because it seems as though a lot is still to come into the public space, it threw at us again the need for this governance model that we are pursuing, so that we are as a population really relying on bits and pieces of information, some being pried out of the office holders that are supposed to give us this information. Some people are doing their investigations and they are finding information, but it all doesn't sit well for building confidence in a population that wants to have confidence in its leadership. And so I think that the real spark for us was how this situation really lays bare the inefficiencies of our governance model. And we think that perhaps it's useful to use it as a stepping stone to try to explore alternative governance models.
Right, and so the essence of the intervention here is that there should be an investigation into how the deal was struck, this indemnity deal that Mr. Nelson appears to be standing on. He says it's been violated and therefore he will refuse to come and testify as he had agreed to, as he'd been paid to do.
Well, since we don't know, I mean, there's been, certainly to my mind, or perhaps I've missed it, there's been no definitive statement and revelation about the entire scenario. Like I said, it's bits and pieces coming out. I think that for us, an important issue, and which is why we think a greater investigation is required, is the business of the use of public funds. Public funds belong to all of us. And when I say all of us, I mean all of us. We have a way of talking about the taxpayer dollar and so on and so forth. And I'm never sure that when we say that we mean everybody, since everybody pays tax in one form or another, but more importantly, everybody belongs here. And consequently, the public funds belong to all of us and should serve all of us, you know? And so ever so often we have these tensions around how public funds are being expended. And certainly in the area of payments, it comes up all the time in terms of payments to attorneys. But in this situation, we are also talking about some allegation that public funds have been paid to someone by an office holder who doesn't seem to have the authority to enter into that kind of agreement. And so that requires a thorough thrashing so that we know precisely what happened. Because we can in fact be accusing or making allegations against public holders or public office holders, and the allegations are not worthy. There's no reason for the allegations because there's been no breach of the trust. But if we do not have the information about precisely what has happened, then we've got to go with what we know. And so it is really in the public interest for us to have a thorough investigation into this matter, and look at how the use of public funds may have breached the faith and trust that we should have in our office holders. I want to take the opportunity, Andy, to also say that this situation has also helped us to understand the importance of independent institutions. So that whereas we are calling for a governance model really that expands the role of citizen participation, we also want to salute the independent institutions that collectively we've agreed to and we've institutionalized. And so it is the Director of Public Prosecutions and that office that stood in the gap for this country. And this is why I guess we're having an airing of this particular matter in the way that we're having it now. Harry, as the Director of Public Prosecutions, not fulfilled his mandate and his responsibility as a responsible office holder, then we may not have been having the discussions that we're having. So for us, it is important that we honor the independent institutions that we have, and we look at ways in which we can strengthen them and protect the office holders.
Yeah, right.
Because it seems to me that it required a tremendous amount of courage on the part of the Director of Public Prosecutions to stand in the gap.
Right.
And so we've got to be
So he refused to have any part of the negotiation of this deal.
From what has been coming out, he has consistently taken that position.
The deal was made nevertheless, right? And that's the question we want to come to. The deal was made nevertheless. And I want to put into that if you're talking about re-examining the governance model, you have a situation in which, so the Attorney General is the next senior person in the cabinet besides the Prime Minister. So he has a lot of leeway and authority to operate. He went about this thing, and he would be, for all intents and purposes, operating as a member of the cabinet who operates in the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You have in the wash in the last 2 weeks, and this matter is occupying the front page, the Prime Minister saying at one remove that this matter doesn't have anything to do with the cabinet, and then the Attorney General saying, well, so he spoke about it with the Prime Minister and I think 2 or 3 other members of the cabinet. Is that acceptable?
It's wholly unacceptable. It is wholly unacceptable, and this is why we stand up as a civil society organization, because the current situation is really a reflection of a deeper problem that we have, in which our policymakers and our office holders take onto themselves authority and power and responsibility that we've not agreed to give them. So that if it is that, again, we can only go with what people have been saying, bits and pieces again to us, that on one hand, it seems as if the Attorney General is acting, he's doing his own thing. And then on the other hand, it seems as if the cabinet was aware that this particular course of action was being undertaken. The fact of the matter is that the Attorney General's office does not have the authority to enter into such an agreement.
Precisely.
So clearly we have a huge problem if the position is that the Attorney General was acting on behalf of the cabinet. Is it that the entire cabinet agreed to allowing our Attorney General to enter into an agreement that he did not have the authority to do so? We need to know.
Well, precisely, and that is what is the source of confusion in this case, at least in my mind. If people are asking, well, who in the cabinet knew about this, and whether or not the cabinet as cabinet knew about it, and the Prime Minister says that the matter is not a matter for the cabinet, well, for whom it is, and the Attorney General is reported to have said, So he discussed it with the Prime Minister and one or two other ministers. Is that sufficient? Should not a matter like this, whether or not whatever we want to make of the propriety of it in the first place, should not a matter like this be the subject of discussion in the cabinet? They say, well, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm proposing if we want to find a way around what the accusation was, so that members of the cabinet are brought into the loop about what is being done in their name and in the name of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that didn't seem to happen.
Perhaps it wasn't brought to the attention of the entire cabinet because the office holder realized that he did not have the authority to do what he was intending to do. And so that in itself should cause us to ask, really, what is the role and function of the cabinet and how is it managed? You know, perhaps a question for us would be, how is the cabinet managed? Because if it is that something as important as this does not make it to the table by design, then how is the cabinet being managed? And also, is it that it did not make it to the cabinet table by design because people know that they're really not authorized to take the action that they're going to take? And this is why we talk about dealing with the question of impunity in this matter. You cannot have an office holder or office holders who are making decisions that they know to be wrong and to be unlawful, and allowing that to then bind the entire country, both in terms of our resources and otherwise, to a decision that has been made. This cannot be an acceptable course of action for a society to allow to prevail, and so we really need to get to the bottom of it, and we need to deal with the question of impunity as we do so, because, you know, there's a strange land there, and some people are more equal than some people, and so it is as we investigate and we hopefully get to the bottom of all that has happened, that we also feel confident that the independent institutions of the country will also take charge of the matter. Because clearly, based on what is outside there again, and like I said, we can only go with the bits and pieces, so I'm not altogether sure that all that we're hearing and all that is being alleged is in fact what is the state of play. But if what we're hearing is in fact the state of play, then lawful action has to be taken. Yeah. This can't be acceptable.
Yeah, and then the man appeared to have been in the driver's seat, because he's insisting now that the deal was that this thing would be disclosed to almost no one, whoever that wanted, whether it was a person or a group of people or an institution in the society that is set up to know these things and be aware of them. And he's saying, well, since some people who in the system, whether in you know, judicial officers or what have you, have found out about it, that he's protesting, and he's saying that I will not come forward because that is breaking the deal we had, and makes it even more sinister.
But if a promise has been made to you, you expect the person who made the promise to stand by the promise? I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know you can fault someone for making the argument that he's making.
Well, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. So the deal, and this is what was guaranteed, and what I'm saying is it makes it worse. And so therefore, the call for this investigation as to what happened and probably who knew what when is what, this is what I'm reading into what you're saying here. This is what we need to know.
We've got to get into it. We've got to get into it. We've got to sort it out. It is quite messy, but more importantly, it's quite unacceptable. When you think about the kinds of funds you're hearing being referred to as the spend on this matter, think about the situation in this country, and of course, coming from civil society, the work that we do gives us some insight into the lives and livelihoods of very many people in this country, and how that has been affected so negatively. And I'm not talking only about COVID. It was happening before. The level of poverty in this country is at an unacceptable high level. We need our amenities, we need our roads, we need our education system, health system, etc., etc., etc. A lot of the very basic and human rights issues that people are entitled to because we're from this place just doesn't get done. And if it is done, it's not done at optimum. And we are talking about millions of dollars. I can think of a whole lot of NGOs who would be very happy to receive those millions. And we would be able to produce a tremendous amount of work and positively impact the state of the human person in Trinidad and Tobago. And so we can't allow ourselves really to be distracted. We've got to be very focused in calling for greater revelations on this matter. There has to be a thorough investigation that will satisfy us as a population. You know, I think this matter is so grave that it really can't be fluff. You know, people can't sit in their high towers and say they're not going to answer questions, and it has nothing to do with the cabinet, and I spoke to X, Y, and Z, and so on and so on and so forth. The thing is out here. We want to know, let's get to it. That's our position.
How hopeful are you? What would be the mechanism for doing that?
For doing that? That's the interesting thing, and it comes back again to the governance model, so that we are not, of course, as you know, as civil society, we do our thing from the margins. So we would do the advocacy work, we would call for the investigation and so on and so forth. WESN is very committed to building partnerships and alliances. And so if that is required, we would reach out to other organizations or individuals that we feel may share a similar kind of commitment at this point. But we operate at the margins. But operating at the margins has as well been effective over time in getting the response that you're looking for, so that we will continue to do that and encourage and join others to do that. But having said all that, it still comes back to the fact that in order to get the kind of investigation we're looking for, it is the office holders that we are challenging who have to make that decision and expend the resources and put the logistics in place and so on and so on and so forth, so that we do our thing. And there are very many voices I find in the society that is speaking about this issue, and I expect that we will see the kind of result that we're looking for. I live by faith, and even in the land where impunity reigns, I live by faith.
Thank you very much. A good point at which to leave it. Folade Mututa, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Have yourself a happy day.
You too.
Take good care.
All right. We'll keep in touch. All right. So let's, as we head up to the top of the hour, let's begin a slight look around the region. We want to go to St. Kitts and Nevis, where we're reporting now that a new parliamentary term was conveyed earlier this week. We have a report on that from ZIZ, the news agency there.
A new session of Parliament was convened on Tuesday at the St. Kitts Marriott Resort. At the session, members of Parliament who were duly elected, senators who were appointed, and the speakers of the House affirmed to be a true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III. In total, 11 members of parliament and 3 senators made pledges. Of note, 4 divisions are represented in the House with the historic election of the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Latoya Jones. The throne speech was received from the Governor General's Deputy, Her Excellency Marcella Liebert Esquire JP, which gave an overview of the socio-economic position of the country and the administration's plans. The opening session took place ahead of the first sitting of the National Assembly, which is slated for Thursday at 10 a.m. at the Assembly's chambers on Church Street.
We go to St. Lucia now, where the Agriculture Minister is reported to be believing that more can be done to reduce the importation of food products with the help of agri-entrepreneurs. Our report on this from HTS News Force.
If countries could take one lesson from the pandemic, it would be to strive to produce their own food or become more self-sufficient. Pandemic protocols slowed down shipments of food, forcing countries to depend on their local farmers and growers. Here in St. Lucia, Agriculture Minister Alfred Prosper says that engaging the farmers will help the country move one step closer to achieving food security.
I've always been saying, and I will say it again today, as the Minister of Agriculture, I am very, very concerned about the high food import bill, and we have to do the best we can to reduce it drastically. I believe we can do it. I know we can do it. And I know once we engage our farmers and we give the farmers the support that they need, we will be able to reduce that.
The CMOS industry took the spotlight during this year's observance of World Food Day on Sunday, October 16, 2022. Prosper says it's all about getting the product to supermarket shelves both here and abroad.
It is one thing to do it at home, but the next level is for us to be able to see it on the supermarket shelves so that people now can say, if I want to get a particular product from the CMOS, I can go to Marcy, I can go to the other supermarkets to get it. The next stage is for us to begin export of those byproducts. Because I've always been concerned that we are producing a lot in St. Lucia. We sell those products or produce outside of St. Lucia. They use it to process, and it comes back to our supermarket shelves where we have to buy it. If we have the potential of making it happen here, I think it's going to be a big boost for the agro-processing subsector.
The minister plans to continue dialogue with the CMOS farmers to enhance the contents on the labels.
So you see those CMOS in the packages, you see all those other byproducts in the small jars and so on, but have they gone through the process of getting Bureau of Standards certification, etc., in terms of the nutrient component? So when you say it's 40% fats or 20% whatever, we know that it is true and it is real. So that was one of the activities. I had the statement by the minister as part of World Food Day.
The government is working with the agri-entrepreneurs to improve the standards of CMOS products and other related goods.
All right, we have news to this hour coming up, on the other side of which we get into a discussion with Mr. Nikolai Edwards. He's calling for the reappointment of the mediation board. He said a lot of work is being delayed because there has been no board for the last 2 years. Stay with us.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise St. Clair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. NTA calls for elections now following spate of crime. Tobago's stage in the sea yet to receive EMA approval. 18-year-old charged with 15-year-old's murder. Adverse weather brings flooding. And internationally, protests in Sri Lanka over economic crisis. Now for the details. Head of the NTA, Gary Griffith, says there is a virtual absence of leadership, visual presence, and even comments with regards to the many recent negative situations that have been taking place all over the country the government appears to be in retreat. Griffith said the latest instance of 15 murders over this past holiday weekend is the latest demonstration that crime is totally out of control, and that 600 murders in a year for the first time in our history is frightfully near. Griffith strongly urges the government to do the honourable thing and call elections so those with the competency, the track record and the fortitude can immediately get to work on solving the myriad amount of problems, as well as charting a course for safety, security, unity and prosperity for every citizen. The Tobago Carnival stage in the sea is yet to receive approval from the Environmental Management Authority. The stage has been constructed on the beach in Scarborough. On October 18th, the EMA said the work was being done without the requisite certificates of environmental clearance. An 18-year-old man has been charged for the murder of 15-year-old Videsh Dukran. Dukran's body was dumped in an outhouse behind a plug shop on Tipperary Road after being shot in the chest. The incident occurred on October 9th. The body was discovered after an anonymous tip. The 22-year-old brother and 46-year-old mother of the suspect was also detained but has since been released. Adverse weather has brought on flooding throughout several areas of Trinidad. The ITCZ is expected to drift over TNT tonight, followed by a tropical wave on Friday. Periods of rain and showers of varying intensities are expected, with a high chance of heavy showers and thunderstorms that can produce intense rainfall in excess of 50 millimeters. Gusty winds in excess of 55 kilometers per hour may be experienced, especially in the vicinity of heavy showers or thunderstorms. Street and flash flooding and localized ponding are also likely in heavy downpours. On to international developments now. Thousands of Sri Lankans protested in the capital, Colombo, on Thursday, with civil rights groups, trade unions and students expressing their discontent over the economic situation and the brutal suppression of previous demonstrations. Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic crisis in decades, pushing many into poverty. Annual food price inflation is at 85.8% and prices of non-food items are at 62.8%. Sri Lanka's gross domestic product is forecast to contract by 8.7%. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for watching.
Secretary Girls IC School presents Wonderland, a bazaar with a difference.
Saturday, November 5th, St. John's Ambulance Headquarters, Ryson Road, Port of Spain, 12 noon to 6 p.m. Many exciting stalls and much more. Walk along Adult Street and win many prizes from adult punch board, hoopla, tin pan alley, and much more. Don't miss the many giveaways and surprises for all kids. Kids, are you ready for face painting, sweet parang, DJ music, Santa workshop, kids corner, dunk tank, wheel of fortune, and so much more? Saturday, November 5th, St. John's Ambulance Headquarters, Ryson Road, Port of Spain, comes alive, 12 noon to 6 p.m.
Wonderland!
So welcome back to the program. Alternative dispute resolution in Trinidad and Tobago is shambles. We take that from a petition made by our next guest, Mediators of Trinidad and Tobago. He's been lamenting the fact that for 2 years there's been no mediation board, so people who have done the programs and put themselves up for certification as mediators in the country aren't being attended to. He brought that to national attention. There's a lot of work to be done. Nikolai Edwards is our guest to discuss that matter. Good to see you, my friend. I think we have a... okay. You there?
Yes. Good morning. Are you hearing me?
Yes. Good to see you. So let's talk about this.
Well.
Go ahead.
Right. So as you laid out, mediation is something that many persons across Trinidad and Tobago would have maybe pursued, whether at the tertiary level, because I would have pursued mediation studies at the postgraduate diploma level and the master's level. And then we would have applied to the Mediation Board of Trinidad and Tobago, expecting within quick order to have our certification offered to us. But unfortunately, there has not been a mediation board in place for a couple of years now. And it shows that the government is not prioritizing this issue. And it's really sad because mediation is a pathway forward, I think, if we want to solve crime and violence in this country, and especially to clear out the backlog of cases in the judicial system.
All right, because this is something I learned when I saw you. So you did this thing at postgraduate level, but you still, I thought that if you went that route, you didn't need to get sort of certified by the board. I thought that those were for people like myself who went and did the course organized by the mediation agencies themselves, and then you go to the board and you get certified. I didn't know that even so you get university qualifications, but you still have to be certified by the board.
So in order to be on the judiciary's roster, because you have to obviously look for opportunities for yourself after the program. That's the reason why many of us have gone to school. We've listened, so we've pursued education with the expectation that we may be able to practice in Trinidad and Tobago or add value to the country in some way, form, or fashion. And the simple fact is, in order to be on the roster of mediators at the judiciary, because there is court-annexed mediation. So sometimes you would see cases come before a judge, and that judge sends the matter to mediation because it's something that can be easily dealt with at that level. Unfortunately, many persons like myself are not able to get onto that roster because we are not certified. Of course, we can practice to some degree in the private sector and so forth, but it makes that much of a difference if you are certified. It gives you a certain level of credibility in order to practice, and also the number of opportunities where private mediation is offered through different agencies is very limited in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2019, I actually did a study as part of my thesis looking at Trinidad and Tobago ADR in this country, and that will include things such as mediation, negotiation, arbitration, conciliation. And what I've found is that it is extremely disjointed in this country. We have the legislation because of the Mediation Act of 2004, and since then we have put systems in place, but we've not really put enough resources behind these institutions, and we've actually seen poaching taking place. I've been told this in some of my by some of the participants that poaching, so you would have one office that is entertaining clients and another office trying to pull them away. So you have all of these issues, lack of funding, lack of communication within the sector. So how can we be serious about treating with violence, with crime and so forth in a serious way if we are not looking at all of the tools? It's not just about putting police officers on the road or more guns in the hands of law protectors and so forth. It's also looking at how can we solve some of these deep wounds in society, and mediation is one of the best methods or options that we have available to us, but unfortunately it's very much overlooked.
So you think in a sense it's appropriate to say that so we've been encouraged with the talk about the talk, but we're not walking the talk, or at least the people who are supposed to be doing that. The system is not allowing for the benefit of this, given the extent to which in the last couple of decades this question of ADR was a front burner issue.
Yes, and I think that Trinidad and Tobago has the potential to be a leader in the Caribbean. Unfortunately, right now that title, I believe, goes to Jamaica. But Trinidad and Tobago could have, in fact, been a leader when it comes to mediation, the dispensation of mediation, the availability of it, because we have the infrastructure. We have seen pilot studies being conducted by the judiciary in terms of peer mediation. So they would have gone to schools across the country country and allowed young people to deal with some of their own matters within the school. So you may have seen deviant behavior and so forth from students, and they were able among their peers to treat with those issues. Those are the kinds of values and skill set that we want to equip our young people and our next generation with. So it's very puzzling. Well, actually, to be honest, it's not that puzzling, because when we see the amount of money that goes into the pockets of lawyers, let's be honest, it's very lucrative for us as a society, which is highly litigious, to maintain that system. But the crazy thing is that lawyers themselves have been going and pursuing mediation courses and so forth because they too see the value in it. So we have to really look at the fact that Trinidad and Tobago is highly adversarial in nature, because we believe as though the only route we have to solve our matters is through the court system, going before a judge, going before a jury. But we have alternatives, hence the title, Alternative Dispute Resolution. And it's just sad that our leaders have not prioritized this. We want to talk about moving this country forward. We want to talk about young people going to school and getting their education and being contributing members of society. But here we have these kinds of opportunities, and the government, it's not about giving jobs to people or whatnot. Let's just simply create the enabling environment. And that's how I was able to recently, and I'll just put this in here, form a group of persons, and we've called ourselves the Mediators of Trinidad and Tobago. We are on Facebook. We're really trying to gather as many people who are championing the cause on a more serious way. So in the next couple of days, we intend to host a meeting virtually, and from there, we'll be able to tackle this issue moving forward.
Yeah, and tackle it, what are the strategies to move forward? Because, for one thing, I see you say because of the activism thus far, you've gotten information that a new board has been constituted.
Yeah, but we have unfortunately no information about this board. We see quite often on the Office of the President's page or the Attorney General's office page when there are appointments, instruments of appointment being given out and so on. So why is it that this board was installed in the dead of night with no information yet to this day? The Office of the President, the Attorney General, the Prime Minister, no one has responded to my call for a mediation board to be installed. So it's just very puzzling that this is being done in the way that it has been. I think that we owed an explanation as to why there had been no mediation board in place for at least the past 2 years. It's owed to us an explanation because we pursued the studies, we listened to those within the sector who said this is a viable option to pursue. You can make a career out of it. You can have a profession out of it. And then years later, we find that the sector or the professionalization of the sector has not advanced significantly. There had been a mediation website for the mediation board that had been taken down a number of years now because I guess the domain has expired. So all of these things show that the focus is not on this area. We would have often heard former Attorney General Faris Alwari talk about all of the changes that are taking place in the judiciary to accommodate more matters coming forth and the disposal of such. But we had not heard that same tempo when it came to mediation and the benefits of it. I think people need to understand that more than anything. You can save so much money by taking your matter to mediation as opposed to going to court, having to hire a lawyer and all of these things. With mediation, it's you and the other person that you're having the conflict with. Both of you are sat down in front of a mediator, and the mediator is not there to dictate how the situation should go, but rather to facilitate dialogue so that it's a win-win situation between both parties. Now, it does not apply to things such as murder, capital offenses, and so forth. Those things have to be dealt with through the criminal justice system. But when we think about mediation, we think about family disputes, we think about neighbors having quarrels.
But community mediation and so on.
Yes, correct. And even at the TTPS level, there had been the implementation of some form of mediation. I believe there's a mediation center with the St. Joseph Police Youth Club. So there are things taking place outside of the arena where it should really be all that fire and energy coming from, and that's the state. You have under Labour, the Conciliation Board, the CPO has a role to play when it comes to negotiation. You have the judiciary heavily involved in mediation and so forth. Why can't we move this thing forward? And let's at least, I just want to say that since issuing that press release, a number of people have written to me thanking me for bringing this issue to light because they are just frustrated. They've pursued the studies, and it's a question now of what next.
Yeah, and the office used to be in a building above Park Street in Port of Spain. That building, at least that part of the building, has been closed for some time now, because every time I go by there, I look at it because I went there. And so, you know, so where you don't know anything about, so the board has been reconstituted, you don't know where it's set up or anything like that? Where are the offices?
No. Unfortunately, no. And the information that we are usually given when we write to the mediation board, because they would have still had somewhat of a secretariat operating, but all they would have been doing is receiving requests or the applications for mediators to be certified. But we need back in a couple of years ago, the mediation board would have hosted annual conferences on mediation. Those things were meant to help strengthen the sector. You saw a great private sector involvement in mediation, but those things have dwindled over the years. And if the judiciary is not sending as many cases to mediation as possible, then you don't have the opportunity to mediate as many matters as we know are available to be mediated, because the average person, as I mentioned before, simply understands going to court as being the way to resolve a matter or taking matters into their own hands. But we believe that mediation is really a crown jewel in our apparatus when it comes to dealing with a lot of the pain, the trauma, the hurt, the violence that exists in this country, and we're only seeing it getting worse and worse at the end of the day. So we're not asking for anything above and beyond. We're not asking for anything crazy. We're just asking that we do what our laws allow for us to do, which is the setting up of a mediation board and giving the option to the country. Let's invest in a lot more communication, advertisements, and so forth to push this sector forward. So it's a simple ask, and unfortunately, it feels a lot of the times that no one is listening to us.
Yeah, and because in the beginning, when it was being promoted first, you know, there were some offices set up in different parts of the country saying, you know, places for community mediation. You don't see that too much anymore.
Even the Legal Aid and Advisory Authority, as part of their legislation or their mandate, they are supposed to also be offering ADR. But that segment, based on the study that I had conducted, that segment or department or division had not been constituted or operationalized. So we're seeing the lags in the system. And it goes back into the approach that we've had when it comes to new legislation and how to move things forward. The procurement legislation, disposal and the procurement and disposal of property legislation. We've had that on our books for a number of years, but we've not been able to operationalize it. And if you go across Trinidad and Tobago in terms of our laws and different offices, we're seeing a breakdown where many of these offices, bodies, institutions, which are set up to make life easier in this country, to deal with matters and so forth in an efficient and effective way, these things are not being prioritized. But yet, we will find the money and the resources to staff new companies, such as the Secondary Roads Company and so forth, all of these things, but we're not treating with those things which already exist. So it comes like we are setting up more and more state enterprises or public bodies, but we're not able to properly resource or take care of those that exist. And that is fundamentally flawed in its approach. So all we're asking is that, please, as persons who have pursued the studies, as persons who want to contribute, who want to give back, who want to help this country move forward, give us our just dues. Otherwise, to be very honest, it comes as if I've wasted gate in pursuing this education. I wasted a number of years thinking that mediation was really going to be the thing to help in the fight against crime in this country. But unfortunately, at this point, it just feels as though we're not going anywhere far. So we're hoping that people will jump on board, will support our cause, and help really push mediation in this country and those in authority to give it the kind of support and resources we need. We can't continue like this for a number of years, wondering why our society is going down the path it's going and not giving fair and due consideration to all the apparatus that we have available to us.
Well, this is one means by which we think that that might have the process might have, the objective might have. But I'm going to ask you. You talk about using it to. You mentioned crime and so on, and I was thinking about wondering whether you believe that mediation might make a difference in addressing the situation in a community such as what is it where you have these murders in the country now, where this 9-year-old boy was killed.
Yes. Because we have to think about when there are those situations in society, in communities where people have lost their lives, where there are reprisal attacks and so forth. You have had years of separation. So we could even look at the example of the gangs in Trinidad and Tobago that we most prominently know about, being Rasta City and Muslim. There are ways and means of bridging the gap between these communities that are literally separated by roadways. And we have the capacity mediators, that is, because we've done the training, and it goes beyond just the 40-hour training, because in the case of myself and many others who've pursued the postgraduate diploma and the master's in mediation studies, we have been given some intense training. We have the theoretical backing and so forth to go into those kinds of situations and make a difference. And I think that's what the country needs now more than anything, healing. It can't be or continue to be as divisive and adversarial as we currently are. And mediation provides an opportunity to deal. And it goes back to a long time ago, how you would see our elders dealing with situations in society, in different communities. So it's bringing that approach in a more structured way, a more efficient way, a way that is tied even to the judiciary. So why won't we want to pursue that? We're seeing year on year that the number of cases, the backlog in our judiciary continues to balloon. We still see so many matters going toward the family court when it comes to maintenance, when it comes to custody and these different things. But mediation can play a role in all of those situations. And I think it's high time that we recognize the value of it. And so we're calling on our leaders in this country to give us the support, give us the tools. That's all that we're asking. As a person who has been waiting for more than 2 years to get certified from the mediation board, I am extremely frustrated, and many other persons, because we were sold this idea that we're doing something good for the country. We were sold the idea that we can really make an impact and the professionalization of the sector. But here we are several years after, wondering, were we lied to? And to be quite honest, this has been the situation when it comes to education in general, because many young people pursue tertiary education with the hopes that they can add value to our country afterward. We're not saying just give us jobs. We're asking for opportunities to put our education to practice. And when we don't find those opportunities in Trinidad and Tobago, brain drain tends to happen, because many young people are leaving this country and going to put their skill set that they would have gained through GATE and the tax-paying dollars. All persons who are listening to this right now would have contributed to our education one way or the other. And how can they get value for money if we don't have the opportunities to put our work to practice? So we're just asking for our fair share. We're asking to be heard, and we're hoping that the mediators of Trinidad and Tobago as a group will become formalized, and we can start approaching the mediation board, whomsoever the members may be and so forth, but looking at being an association or a representative body for mediators in this country to move it forward. So just as how you have the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, we want to have mediators of Trinidad and Tobago to be able to start having those conversations and paint a real picture of the state of mediation in this country and a vision for how it can move to the next level. I think we have the capacity, we have the knowledge, we have the know-how, so it's now about formalizing that and taking our fight to where it needs to be taken.
All right, very well said, my friend Nikolai Edwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say again, so persons interested can go to Facebook and type in Mediators of Trinidad and Tobago. It's a Facebook group, and from there we'll be posting for us to host a meeting virtually to chart the way forward. So please join us on this journey. Thanks a lot.
I will check it out. All right, thank you very much. Well, let's take a little peek as to what's happening outside Trinidad and Tobago, outside the region. We want to take a look at an international story here about the situation is continuing in Iran, where police opened fire on protesters in the hometown of Mahsa Amini. You know that story if you've been following us here. Let's take a look at that from France 24.
Thousands pour into the streets to mark 40 days since the death of Mahsa Amini and the end of the traditional mourning period. These Iranians are heading from the city of Saqqez in Kurdistan province, where the 22-year-old was from, to the cemetery where she was buried. On these videos posted on social media, mourners can be heard chanting anti-government slogans. Riot police were reportedly deployed in large numbers in Saqqez in anticipation of fresh unrest. Internet access in the city has also been cut. Fresh protests have also taken place in a number of universities in Tehran and elsewhere in the country. Mahsa Amini was arrested by the morality police in Tehran on the 13th of September for wearing her hijab loosely. She fell into a coma after collapsing at a detention center and died 3 days later. The news sparked fury. At her funeral, women ripped off their headscarves and burned them in solidarity. The protests quickly spread and have evolved into one of the most serious challenges to the Islamic Republic since the 1979 revolution. Security forces have fired live ammunition and tear gas to disperse demonstrations, killing over 200 people, including 29 children, since the protests erupted. That's according to rights groups.
Well, let's ask you to look at this. This is the front page of the Newsday Trinidad and Tobago today. This see that story. So the crime continues. Bullets miss a baby. Parents shield the daughter as gunmen shoot them dead. That's the front page of the Newsday Trinidad and Tobago. On the Newsday Tobago, boat rides hit by bad weather. That's what it looks like on the front page, on the back page. So that's a little taste as to what's inside these publications. Let's tell you this stuff. The Marine Marathon began in 1976 with the goal of promoting goodwill. There's one runner who best exemplifies that spirit, an 80-year-old doctor who runs 170 marathons across the 7 continents, all to put a spotlight on helping others. So we ask you to watch this.
The Marine Corps Marathon being run here in Washington this weekend started in 1976 with the goal of promoting goodwill. Perhaps no runner better exemplifies that spirit than the doctor you're about to meet. Here's CBS's Jan Crawford.
This weekend, Dr. Glenn Galehood will run his 45th Marine Corps Marathon. He's only missed it twice, but he's up for almost any race. So how many marathons have you run?
170 to date and counting.
How many continents?
7 continents.
He saves his medals, but his true passion is saving lives with his nonprofit Mission to Heal. It brings medical supplies and training to the most remote corners of the world.
We have done what we can to help, not just to heal the folk that we see immediately by cutting and sewing, but by teaching those skills such that it continues beyond us.
His medical missions are inspired by his runs.
The marathon is a good metaphor because it takes discipline, it takes effort, and it takes a commitment. That's what healthcare is.
Dr. Galehood is 80 years old. So how much longer do you plan to keep doing missions and running marathons?
Until the next one, and the next one, and the one after that.
Because crossing a finish line means it's time to start a new mission. Jan Crawford, CBS News, Durwood, Maryland.
And that's our broadcast in this edition of the program. We tell you, as always, you can keep in touch with us here at AM Prime at WENCC on all our social media platforms. You send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. We tell you to stay safe and stay with us. Have a good weekend. We see you around. Thanks for watching.